Hello, my name is Danny Tercios, and I will be explaining the importance of IT project management. Throughout this presentation, we will be touching on subjects like IT project management as a whole, the skills and leadership that an IT project manager should have, the project integration management, the requirements for a project, how a project is scheduled, and then have some closing remarks about projects. To understand IT project management, you must first understand what a project is. A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product or service. In terms of IT, this could be new systems, a new server, anything that creates some information technology service or system. And with project management, it is a planning and scheduling and controlling of activities to meet the objectives. This means there's a person who undertakes the task to plan and schedule everything and then prioritize the requirements and make sure everything is going to come out fluidly and correct. Now, why is project management important? Couldn't anybody just go ahead and plan a project themselves? Well, projects tend to have multiple parties involved and a bunch of teams with different needs and expectations. So when you have all these people that have a different mind and different ideas of how a project should be commenced or undertaken, there tends to be a lot of disputes. So it's kind of a challenge to keep everyone on the same track. And because of this ignorance, a lot of projects tend to fail. So without the right guidance, you're not going to be expected to pass or have a great project life cycle. This is why it is important to understand how a project should be managed. There are some typical steps people follow for a typical project. First, they define the problem. Then, they plan the project. After they have a plan for the problem, they'll execute the plan. And after this plan, or even during the execution of the plan, they'll begin to monitor and control any progress and any changes that must be going on for the project. It is this point where people tend to confirm requirements and deliverables. Once everything is confirmed and ready to be distributed, then they will close the project and is some closing activities done commenced. Project manager has a lot of skills and leadership styles and development that they have to understand to become a successful project manager. The skills that make a project manager excel would have to be very people-oriented skills. Skills like communication, skills like problem solving, negotiating, leadership skills, team building, making sure everybody's on the same page. All these skills are very important to a project because they keep everybody in the loop, make sure everybody's understanding what's the end goal, and keeps everybody on the same track. To communicate the ideas, to organize all the tasks together, to budget everything. And then if any challenges arise, they can solve a problem. They can negotiate the budget, and they can also lead their team to the direct path and have a very open mind about changes. Now, skills are one thing, but the management style is also another thing. When a project manager is leading a project, there has to be some form of leadership involved. There's many examples of this by directing. Directing is one form of telling everybody what to do and making sure that they do it. There's also other styles, kind of like coaching, where you have guidance and you don't directly tell them, but you influence on them enough so they understand the project path. So other styles are like consensus, where everybody gets the same say and they all get the same idea. But typically, the leadership style comes from experience, and you kind of want to build your own as you go along. Putting some of these together tends to help a lot, but that all comes with the person individually. Now we get into project integration management. This is how a project manager gets everybody integrated into the same project. How do we get everybody on board and get everything going? Now, as we mentioned earlier, the typical plan lifecycle has defined the problem or initiating the plan, kind of like the project itself. Then we plan the project around this problem. After that, we execute, control what's happening, and then close on the project. When planning a project, there's a couple things we have to start off with. First, the project must be clearly defined. That way, everybody and all the teams involved understand what's going on. And to do this, we must first set goals, some common goals that everybody can meet up at certain points and understand and track progress and understand where we are at the moment. Another thing that must be defined will be the deliverables. What is the outcome that we're going to be expecting from this project? What is the products or maybe some documentations that we need? All this must be covered before the project begins. And then also, we need to determine who's going to be having a vested interest in our product. This would be the stakeholders, anybody involved with our project. So you must understand who is involved. Once our project is planned, we can submit the project plan for execution. This project plan will have all the requirements laid out, determining what is required from us and the project itself, and what will we need for it. We can get this information from supporting resources, and these resources can come from past projects or some other documentations that we've seen other people try these projects. Then we can use tools and techniques to help us with the plan. This could be like change control team or a risk management team. When changes come in, they are logged and determine how they will affect the project. And risk management will determine what will come up as a risk and impede our project. Then we must determine what is our deliverables and then have documentation for all these changes or any risks that come up. These will be determined as outputs of our project. So we have inputs, the tools and techniques we used, and the outputs. Changes in projects are obviously going to happen. They're inevitable. There's no way everybody knows what's going to happen throughout the project lifecycle from the beginning. So how do we handle these changes? We submit change requests, and then to the change request, it affects the project plan. So we have a change control team. So when these changes come in, they'll keep them logged, understand how the project is affected, and push the project through with it. They'll determine at the end of the project lifecycle how these changes could have been avoided and determine before the project started. And these are known as the lessons learned documentation. These are also submitted at the end with the outputs. So now that we know how a project plan is initiated and executed, we must know how to define the requirements. When planning to find the requirements of a project, there are multiple ways to find this. You can do information gathering techniques like interviewing, observing, or even having a questionnaire for your users and stakeholders to understand what features they want. And then once you have all these documentations and information, you can develop a statement that clearly defines what is expected from the project and what is required from everything. Once you define these requirements, you can break it down to a task level and create something called a work breakdown structure. This document will be used by almost everybody in the team to understand at a task level what is going on, and the progress can be tied to it to understand where we are at the project. Before all this is done, however, we must verify that the requirements are correct and the stakeholders are okay with it. Then they can sign off of it, and this will be known as the agreement document. Similar to change control with the project itself, requirements also have their own change control. So how do we handle a requirement change? First, we must ask ourselves, does the change go hand in hand with what the project goal is? If it does, then we can move forward with it. If it doesn't, then what is the point of the change? Then, when do we incorporate the change? Do we do it right away, or do we wait for a moment where there's an opening in task that we can push it in? After we're done with that, we can manage, how do we manage the change? Do we just push it in directly, or do we use soft input in? Now, a change may occur when there's an error in the product, an error in the project, or a new feature requested, an external issue, or response toward a risk. These changes will have to be a response to everything, as we would need to alter what's going on with the project to handle this change. So a lot of change control and requirements. But as we're going through now, we can understand how is a project scheduled. There are a lot of things that go in hand with scheduling, as there is tasks and a lot of teams involved. A lot of things are going to be becoming conflicting. Now, project scheduling is an important aspect of project management. Without the project scheduling, there's not a very clear line of what's going on and when it's going to happen. So what we must do is screen every task and determine how long it will take. Since we know the project length, we can determine how long we have for the project itself. Then using the work breakdown structure, we can break it down to a task level and assign time to each task individually. By using past projects or maybe some past other information, we can make an assumption of how long that task will take. If we don't have any history on it, then we can just make a general assumption for the task itself. Lastly, we can use some goals as the milestones to measure each progress. So you put the goals at each step, or not each step, but every once in a while. And then at that point, we can determine if everything is good and going on well, or if there's change needed. Scheduling a project at the task level is not an easy task. To do this, you must first understand the difference between a hard dependency and a soft dependency. A hard dependency is typically a task that is dependent on another before it can commence. So it makes it hard for the schedule to begin this task until the other is done, causing a time delay for that task. Soft dependencies can usually occur at the same time and begin before the other finishes. Another thing to be aware of is a time restriction. You obviously have the project length restriction, but on top of that, you also have the team scheduling. Some teams cannot work the same as others, and others have different work styles. So knowing how a team functions and how they will get their work completed and when is very important when scheduling them. There are also some resources a scheduler can use to assist them in the planning. A milestone chart is very important, as these milestones can be placeholders and have times where people can meet up and determine that their project is on the same path and everything is going okay. Another thing would be a NAT chart. A NAT chart assists with the project planning and is very similar to a work breakdown structure, but it has a very clear critical path and it shows the time and progress of everything going on. It is a very useful chart.